Gyeongju, a city that holds 1,000 years of history. The cherished values preserved over time have shaped who we are today. Now, through new encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Gyeongju come together. APEC meets Gyeongju.
In our headlines on this Friday, December 19th, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung shares his concerns about the lack of communication on the Korean peninsula, highlighting the importance of interactions across the border for mutual prosperity. Over in Japan, policymakers at the central bank there raised their benchmark interest rate to 0.75%, its highest level in 30 years, in line with efforts to ease inflation despite the weak economy. Meanwhile, following approval from the U.S. Congress, President Donald Trump signs into law a defense budget for next year that, among other stipulations, restricts the reduction of American soldiers in South Korea. We start with the policy briefings by the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Unification that were shared earlier on this Friday. And with regard to the latter, President Lee Jae-myung lamented the presence of heightened tensions and the absence of communication on the Korean peninsula. Our correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
남북 관계를 요새 제가 들여다보면 그런 느낌이 들어요. 진짜 원수가 된 것 같습니다.
This was how President Lee Jae-myung said he viewed the current mood on the peninsula, as he was briefed on Friday by the chiefs in charge of foreign affairs and North Korea policy.
북한이 전 분계선에 걸쳐서 삼중 철책을 치고 다리를 끊고 도로를 끊고 옹벽을 쌓고 이런 경우가 처음이라는 겁니다. 수십 년 만에. 북한은 혹시 남쪽이 북침하지 않을까? 이 걱정을 해가지고.
He said that political motivation is to blame, mentioning the hardline approach by the previous administration. With Pyongyang rejecting outright calls for dialogue, Lee called for efforts by the Unification Ministry.
남북 간에 소통하고 또 대화하고 협력하고 공존 공영의 길을 가야 되는데 지금은 바늘구멍 하나도 여지가 없습니다. 인내심을 가지고 선제적으로 주도적으로 남북 간의 적대가 완화될 수 있도록.
The Unification Minister stressed the need to relieve sanctions against the North.
In reality, sanctions against North Korea have become ineffective. The backyard for trade with China, which accounts for 90% of its trade, is widely open, and the North sees sanctions as the most hostile act.
On diplomacy surrounding the peninsula,
next year, we will make sure to hold another South Korea-U.S. summit in a timely manner and reaffirm follow-up measures to what's been agreed at the top level in particular in nuclear-powered submarines, nuclear energy, and shipbuilding.
The foreign minister added that arrangements will be made for President Yi's state visit to China early next year and vowed to continue top-level diplomacy with Japan. President Yi also instructed his officials to speed up introducing mail-in and electronic voting systems for overseas Koreans.
비행기 타고 무슨 대여섯 시간 가서 투표를 했니, 무슨 차 타고 1박 2일로 가서 투표를 했니, 그러고 있잖아요. 그러지 않게 해야죠. 어쨌든 그건 국가의 책임이라고 생각이 됩니다.
When it comes to public access to information, he was critical of the government restricting South Koreans' access to North Korea's state media Dodong Shinmun, saying that granting the access wouldn't make people turn into communists or pro-North Koreans. Yoon Seok-hwa, Arirang News.
Following approval from the U.S. Congress, President Donald Trump has signed into law a defense budget for next year that, among other stipulations, restricts the reduction of American service members from South Korea. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
After President Trump signed the National Defense Authorization Act for next year on Thursday local time, it officially took effect immediately. The NDAA, an annual bill that authorizes military spending, was signed after it was passed by both chambers of Congress. The bill approves a defense budget of $901 billion, about $8 billion more than requested by the administration. A key provision bars the use of defense funds to reduce U.S. troops in South Korea below the current level of 28,500 and reaffirms the U.S. nuclear umbrella commitment to Seoul. The funding restriction, which had been absent during the Biden administration, returns under Trump's second term for the first time in 5 years. The bill also restricts funding for the transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S.-South Korea Combined Forces Command to a South Korea-led command to prevent the transfer process from deviating from the agreed framework. The restriction can be lifted after 60 days if the Defense Secretary certifies the transfer aligns with U.S. national security interests and has been coordinated with allies and member states of the United Nations Command. Provisions granting priority to South Korean and Japanese companies for investments in new shipyard construction in the U.S. were ultimately excluded from the final NDAA. Instead, the act calls for the development of a comprehensive strategy to improve the shipbuilding sector, including optimizing existing public shipyard infrastructure. When it comes to Europe, the NDAA prohibits reducing U.S. troop levels permanently stationed or deployed in Europe below 76,000 for more than 45 days. Adding to that, it authorized an additional $800 million in military assistance to Ukraine, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars in additional support for allies or strategic partners such as Israel, Taiwan, and Iraq. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, National Security Advisor Wee Sung-lak says Seoul and Washington have agreed to promptly implement follow-up measures to the agreements outlined in their joint fact sheet. The comment was made to members of the media early Thursday local time, following a busy agenda in Washington, D.C. Now, while refraining from sharing specific details, he claimed progress had been made in the latest bilateral talks. Upon his arrival in the U.S. this past Tuesday, we met with his U.S. counterpart Marco Rubio, who also serves as Secretary of State, before speaking with U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright on Wednesday. Meanwhile, also later on Thursday, we sat down with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in New York. Over in Japan, the central bank there has raised its benchmark interest rate to its highest since the year 1995 as part of efforts to rein in inflation. Our Park Jin covers this rise and its broader implications.
As widely expected, the Bank of Japan on Friday decided to raise its short-term key interest rate from 0.5% to 0.75%. This 0.25 percentage point increase is the first since the bank raised its key rate in January this year, and is also the first since Sanai Takaichi became Japan's prime minister in October. The decision puts Japan's current key rate at its highest level in 30 years and 3 months. The Bank of Japan raised rates, citing the likelihood of wages and prices continuing to rise moderately. A Japanese interest rate decision has a big impact on global asset markets, as a rise can cause what is called a yen carry trade unwind, meaning that investors stop borrowing cheap Japanese yen to buy high-yield foreign assets.
Japan has long maintained ultra-low, even negative, interest rates. This allowed investors to borrow cheaply in Japan and invest overseas, earning profits even from simple deposits. The so-called yen carry trade was widely used by global funds, including in South Korea. But as rates rise, borrowing capacity shrinks, and existing trades lose profitability. That could trigger asset sell-offs, leading to sharp declines in asset prices and higher interest rates.
Another economics professor also pointed to the potential impact on South Korea's asset markets.
Low-interest yen loans that flowed overseas could start to unwind. Funds would likely move out of markets like South Korea and back into Japan. That could pressure Korean stocks and trigger sell-offs in Korean bonds, so the impact on Korea's financial markets could be significant.
Meanwhile, the Bank of Japan has stated that it could raise interest rates further if prices rise steadily above 2% and wages also increase. It believes current monetary conditions remain supportive and plans to gradually adjust policy in response to price and economic developments to ensure the stable achievement of its inflation target. 박준환, Arirang News.
And back here in South Korea, producer prices rose for the third month in a row in November in light of the weak South Korean currency and strong demand for semiconductors. Our Yoon Jin covers this latest increase and its implications.
As the Korean won remains weak and demand for semiconductors is strong, producer prices in November rose for the third consecutive month. According to preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday, the producer price index recorded 121.31 for November. This marks a 0.3% gain month on month, following a 0.4% increase in September and 0.3% in October. Producer prices are a statistical measure of price changes in goods and services supplied by local producers to the domestic market, which is why it serves as a key indicator of future consumer inflation. Data showed prices of agricultural, forestry, and fishery products, in fact, fell 2.1% in November from the previous month, while gas, water, and electricity prices also dropped 0.4%. However, prices of industrial goods rose 0.8% month on month. Those of computers, electronic, and optical equipment increased 2.3%. And coal and petroleum products rose 5%. The 5% jump was the largest since September 2023, when prices jumped 6.9%. The head of the BOK's price statistics team, Lee Moon-hee, explained that although global crude oil prices fell, the appreciation of the won against the dollar and rising refining costs combined to drive petroleum products prices higher. He further explained the impact of the exchange rate on producer prices, as increases in the prices of imported raw materials or intermediate items can raise domestic production costs, thereby indirectly causing upward pressure on producer prices. The data showed the domestic supply price index, which accounts for both producer and import prices, added 0.7% month on month in November. Yoon Jin, Arirang News.
Trade between North Korea and China rebounded in November to its highest level in 6 years. North Korea monitoring website NK News, citing the Chinese Customs Service, reported the bilateral trade hit $281 million last month. This amount is the highest since October 2019, when trade totaled $287 million. China exported various machinery to the regime in recent months, including medical devices and agricultural machinery. Now, notably, a vehicle banned from being traded under UN Security Council resolutions was also found to have been transferred to North Korea. U.S. President Donald Trump says efforts to end the war in Ukraine are advancing towards a potential breakthrough. His optimism comes ahead of planned talks between U.S. and Russian officials in Miami this coming weekend. Our Ising-jae has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump says talks aimed at ending the war in Ukraine are moving closer to a possible breakthrough as American, Russian, and Ukrainian officials prepare for a new round of diplomatic contacts this weekend. Speaking on Thursday, President Trump said negotiations are getting close to something ahead of a planned meeting in the United States involving Russian officials.
Well, they're getting close to something, but I hope Ukraine moves quickly. I hope Ukraine moves quickly because Russia's there. And, every time they take too much time, then Russia changes their mind.
According to a U.S. official, a Kremlin envoy will travel to Florida to discuss Washington's proposal, part of an intensifying diplomatic push by the Trump administration to broker a deal. The official said Kirill Dmitriev, who heads Russia's Sovereign Wealth Fund, is scheduled to meet Saturday in Miami with President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff, as well as Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Witkoff and Kushner are expected to meet Dmitriev following earlier discussions this week in Berlin with Ukrainian and European officials. Those talks focused on U.S. security guarantees for Kyiv, possible territorial concessions, and other elements of the American-authored framework aimed at ending the conflict. Asked about the Miami meeting, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said on Thursday that Moscow is preparing for contacts with the U.S. to hear the results of the Berlin discussions, but declined to provide further details. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky struck a more skeptical tone. In an address on Wednesday, he said Russia is preparing the coming year as a year of war, despite ongoing U.S.-brokered peace efforts. Zelensky pointed to comments made by Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier in the week, saying they sent clear signals of Moscow's aggressive intent. Zelensky also highlighted an upcoming summit in Brussels, where European leaders are expected to discuss the possible use of roughly $250 billion in frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. He said the outcome of those talks must ensure that Russia understands continuing the war next year makes no sense, adding that Europe's decision will be critical to sustaining Ukraine's defense and shaping the path forward. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, Yoon Seok-hwa, a central member of South Korea's modern theatre, passed away on this Friday at the age of 69. According to the Korean Actors Association, Yoon had been battling a brain tumor after a related surgery in the year 2022. Her final presence on stage was in August of last year, when she made a brief guest appearance in the production Toccata. Yoon earned critical acclaim for her powerful performances in numerous theatrical productions and later expanded her career to produce and direct works on stage. 'Tis the season to be jolly, and for those of you here in Seoul, there are a number of festive events currently underway aimed at spreading the Christmas cheer and more. Our Park Go-nu was out and about.
Long lines, but no complaints. Only smiles and anticipation. People patiently wait near Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul, as if something magical is about to happen. As visitors pass through the entrance, the scene feels like stepping into a Christmas fairy tale. As soon as the sun goes down, the Christmas market lights turn on. Christmas is nearly here and people are enjoying the Christmas vibe. The most popular spot is this 50-meter landmark Christmas tree where people take nice pictures and make long-lasting memories with their loved ones. Inside the market, it's bustling with visitors, while hundreds of vendors sell everything from Christmas goods to local handmade items, including Rudolph-shaped candles, colorful wrapping cloths, and traditional lucky pouches. Photo spots are everywhere, like this merry-go-round, which is especially popular with families with children.
It really feels like Christmas and is such a nice experience. There's so much for the kids to enjoy: the merry-go-round, photo spots, and even small things to buy.
An interesting twist for them is that these shops change every week through the end of the month, giving visitors a magical chance to discover something new each time they come.
Winter is usually the off-season here, especially at night. But tourists still need things to see and enjoy after dark. That's why we created this, and we plan to expand it even further.
There are visitors from across the globe, such as European tourists, familiar with traditional Christmas markets back home.
We didn't realize that Christmas is quite so popular here. I certainly wasn't expecting to see a Christmas market. It's absolutely beautiful. The light show was fantastic. Everyone seems really happy.
As night falls, the lights become even more dazzling. And the celebration doesn't stop here. Just a short walk away, Cheonggyecheon Stream is glowing with its light festival, running through early January. The displays are made of Korean traditional paper hanji, featuring illuminated sculptures that blend tradition with modern design. One standout is the Pokemon character Magikarp, as it's gone viral on social media, drawing even more visitors. Together, the Gwanghwamun Market and Cheonggyecheon Light Festival have already attracted around 1.5 million visitors in just over a week. Due to high popularity, operating hours have recently been extended by around an hour, and the Seoul Tourism Organization now aims to welcome 6 million visitors this season. And thanks to all of that, downtown Seoul's winter nights are feeling much warmer, brighter, and just a little more magical than ever before. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In the United States, the Trump administration has moved to sharply restrict transgender, gender-affirming medical care for minors. The Department of Health and Human Services has unveiled proposals that would cut off Medicaid and Medicare funding to hospitals providing puberty blockers, hormone therapy, or related procedures for children. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said on Thursday that the treatments are, quote, malpractice, and that the changes would protect children's futures. The proposals would affect access to transgender care in nearly 24 states, where such care remains legal and covered by Medicaid. Major U.S. medical organizations oppose the move, saying it contradicts established standards of care and could put lives at risk. The rules still must go through a lengthy public review process, but hospitals have already begun halting care in anticipation of federal action. In Southeast Asia, Thailand on Thursday carried out airstrikes near Cambodia's Poipet border crossing amid renewed fighting between the two countries. Thailand said it bombed a logistics center used to store BM-21 rocket systems. Officials from the two countries say the clashes this month have killed at least 21 people in Thailand and 17 in Cambodia. More than 800,000 people have been displaced. Poipet is the largest land crossing between the two countries and a major casino hub. The fighting follows the collapse of a ceasefire brokered earlier this year by Malaysia and the United States. In the United States, a business jet on Thursday crashed while landing at Statesville Regional Airport in North Carolina, killing all 7 people on board. Authorities said the Cessna C550 erupted into flames after hitting the ground. The victims included retired NASCAR driver Greg Biffle, his wife, their 2 children, and 3 others. Flight records show the aircraft was registered to a company run by Biffle. NASCAR called Greg Biffle a champion and a beloved figure in the sport and will be remembered for his passion for racing. In Egypt, scientists have discovered fossils of a previously unknown ancient crocodile species in the country's western desert. Researchers say the animal, named Wadisucus kasabi, lived around 80 million years ago and measured up to 4 meters long. The fossils were found near the Karga and Baris oases and included partial skulls from multiple individuals. Scientists say the discovery fills a major gap in North Africa's fossil record and helps explain how crocodile species evolved before the extinction of dinosaurs. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
This Friday morning started off quite cold with temperatures falling below freezing in many regions. As the day goes on, warmer southern winds moved in, leading temperatures to go up quickly. It will be just as mild tomorrow. However, colder air is expected to move in overnight and it will turn colder on Sunday. Rain is forecast across the country tomorrow, starting from western areas early tomorrow morning and spreading to the east by late morning. Rainfall will not be heavy or long-lasting, but as temperatures are expected to drop quickly on Sunday, icy roads could be around. Seoul will start off at 9 degrees Celsius tomorrow morning, Chuncheon at 2 degrees. Daily highs will rise up to 11 degrees in Seoul, 17 degrees in Daegu. The morning temperature in Seoul will plunge to -5 degrees on Monday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us and thank you for now.
우선 저희 누나가 발레를 하다 보니까 자연스럽게 누나 발레 학원에 따라가서 누나가 하는 모습을 보니까 저도 하고 싶다고 생각이 조금 들어서 발레 음악에 맞춰서 아무 춤이나 추다 보니까 그냥 그 음악에 맞춰서 제가 몸을 움직이는 게 재밌다고 느껴졌었는지 발레를 계속 하고 있더라고요. 나이가 좀 어릴 때 제가 가진 장점이 무엇인지도 모르고 아예 제가 가진 단점도 모를 때 발레를 시작했다 보니까 제일 큰 문제가 이제 평발이었던 것 같아요. 평발이다 보니까 발레를 할 때 쥐가 조금 많이 나는 편이라 그거를 견뎌가면서 춤을 계속 춰야 했던 거 그게 가장 극복하기 힘들었던 것 같고요. 제가 다리가 다른 친구들보다 조금 두껍다고 해서 제 다리를 조금 싫어했었는데 근데 이제 로잔에 갔다 오고 나서 오히려 제 다리에서 나오는 파워풀한 힘이 좋았다고 해주시는 분들도 있다는 걸 느껴가지고 그 두 개가 가장 극복하기도 힘들었고 기억에 남는 것 같아요. 프릭스티 로잔이라는 콩쿨 자체가 학생들 사이에서는 가장 크고 의미 있는 콩쿨이다 보니 제가 그 로잔 영상을 보면서 자라왔기 때문에 그 무대에 서서 제가 춤을 췄다는 것 자체가 엄청 인상 깊었던 것 같아요. 제가 걸어왔던 길, 이게 맞는 방법일까? 근데 그런 의구심을 다 없앨 수 있게 제가 가는 길이 맞았다라는 거를 확인시켜줬던 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 감정이 들어서 조금 감격스러웠던 것 같아요. 한 배역에만 잘 할 수 있는 명수가 아니라 어떠한 배역을 받아도 다 넣어서 소화해낼 수 있는 그런 스펙트럼이 넓은 명수가 되고 싶습니다.
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
On Press Perspective today, we touch upon President Lee Jae-myung's adoption of a new policy briefing format, as well as plans for social media restrictions for minors by his nominee for Media Commission. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, December 19th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we delve first into two initiatives, one in practice and another in planning for the benefit of the broader public. We start with these two news stories before we move on to others. And for details on them, I have freelance journalist Yang Chen-hao from Taiwan here in the studio. Chen-hao, welcome.
Hello, glad to be here.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Colin, today we start with you. Let's begin with some information about the new format adopted by President Lee Jae-myung with regard to policy briefings by his officials.
Yes, this is a very 2020 story. President Lee Jae-myung is doing streaming policy briefings, so anybody can tune into these. And as he has said, these could be more entertaining than Netflix for some of their viewers. And in a country where there's Netflix branded food at convenience stores, that's saying something if you can compete against the juggernaut of streaming media. But they've been entertaining to some for one reason, that they are somewhat dramatic. Lee Jae-myung has, in some of these broadcasts, berated his underlings or berated sort of members lower than him in government, which is pretty much everybody, for example, inability to answer questions truthfully or BSing, as we might say in the U.S. So, you know, you're glad to see that on one end, but some Koreans are not so glad to see this dynamic of the boss publicly giving a hard time to an underling. It reminds them too much of what they encounter at work sometimes, this idea of gapjil, of a superior putting an inferior, shall we say, in their place. So that's, you could say, an ugly side to it, but then it's also comporting with Lee Jae-myung's idea of making a more open democracy, or a more, not necessarily participatory, but a more directly communicative democracy, where what happens in the Blue House, the decisions he makes, the processes behind them are more, in theory, open to the public, to viewers, to listeners. Well, that's all well and good. I feel like some of the remarks Lee Jae-myung has made are sort of less friendly toward free speech in general, so we'll see how he squares that circle. But as a side note, I was just yesterday at one of these ceremonies at immigration that welcomes new Korean citizens to citizenship here. And there's a video message that is played at all of these ceremonies from President Lee Jae-myung. And it was remarked like, oh, he's looking very serious. Like, this is uncharacteristically serious, this manner in which he's delivering this message, which reminded me, yes, I suppose to many foreigners, Lee Jae-myung looks very bureaucratic in his appearance, but he does have something of the entertainer about him in many ways. I mean, he's not flamboyant, he's not like certain presidents we could name from other countries, but he does have, I think, the entertainer's instinct on some level, or at least he's used to facing the public. So I think maybe he can find his métier in this streaming briefing medium. We'll see.
Right, and these live-streamed briefings, Chen-hao, have been making international headlines as well. Do tell us why.
Adding to Colin, remember that President Lee, when he was like the governor of Gyeonggi province, he used to be joining the variety show. Yeah, so that I think he was willing to do that to promote himself. But the reason is very simple, because we rarely see see other countries' leader doing the same thing. Usually, what we do see is like something like British Prime Minister giving a very brief interview several days a week for a short, for 10 or 20 seconds interview with BBC or ITV to share the view on the week's key policy issues. But as we've talked about before, comparing to other previous South Korean presidents, President Lee, his media strategy is something quite different. Since taking office, he's been holding frequent briefings with both domestic and international journalists and taking questions directly on the camera, on live. And now if we look back at former President Yoon Seok-hwa, he's also tried what's called doorstepping session, taking questions from reporters while walking to the presidential house. I know like Arirang News, you also have reported that for like a couple of months before. At that time, it felt like a fresh move. But here's the thing, the sessions like this that requires very careful preparation. If I myself is the president and planned a doorstep session, I spent the previous night with my officials, with my team members, going what kind of questions it might come up and prepare the solid responses first. And when you're ready, the press get useful material for their reports, for their story, and the public gets a clear sense or reply of where the government stands and how it is planning to act. But if we look at President Yoon, he didn't prepare. It is somehow like, should I use the word of off the cuff or improvised? Yeah, as the reporter's questions become sharper, he simply couldn't answer. He can't handle it, and he couldn't handle it. Often, as he could say, it is like, have a nice day before walking away, and that's all. So naturally, the media saw that this is very invasive, criticized him as unprepared and insincere, and his approved ratings, we can see that it's like dropping down after that again. And President Lee Jae-myung, on the other hand, represents complete opposite. He's very articulate and quick on his feet and knows how to present or promote himself as a sharp contrast to his predecessor. And to be fair, I do give him credit for pushing a more open and transparent style of the current new government. And in the recent meeting, he directly told the officials, for example, I'm just asking because I'm curious. So if you don't know, just say you don't know. I'm not someone who checks whether you've memorized numbers or every detail. And the real problem is pretending to know when you don't. That distorts judgment, and that's even worse. That's what he said directly on the live broadcast to the other officials. So far, things seems to be going smoothly now, till now. From the briefings, I've watched several episodes, several days. Both the president and his officials, the government team members, and appear genuinely engaged in explaining and discussing issues. And as the public sessions continue, the more people will get used to them. In the end, what really matters isn't just the live streaming itself. It's whether the president and his team are truly thinking, debating, and discussing and making real decisions for the policy.
Right, indeed, Chen Hao. Let's now move on to another issue of interest, Chen Hao. It's been about a week, a little bit more than a week, since Australia put in place a social media ban for those under the age of 16. And countries, including South Korea, are actively looking into launching similar campaigns. First of all, what has been the broader response to this particular ban over the past week or so?
There are, in fact, mixed opinions on these issues. These days, almost every child, they have a smartphone themselves, and they use social media so frequently, and even with short videos becoming especially so popular among these young generations. But I have colleagues working in both middle schools and universities, and we've noticed a very clear trend, even in the university journalism school. Students who spend lots of time on short videos tend to have weaker reading and writing skills. And among middle schoolers who are used to short-form contents, this kind of videos, they have problems watching long movies or long documentaries, or even reading long articles will be very difficult for them, and they easily feel anxious. that's the reason some people hope that restricting or even banning social media for this kind of younger generation access could help improve the situation. But on the other hand, there is a strong counter-argument. Instead of banning teenagers from using this, many say that we should first strengthen the regulations on the social media company itself. After all, like you can see that misinformation, fake news, and AI-generated photos and sensational videos are spreading rapidly through this kind of social media, and these can easily distort younger generations' understanding of the world. But the truth is, even adults themselves are often lack the ability to judge what is real and what is not. Even if young people, they are properly taught, like for example, media literacy, social media can actually become a valuable tool, I believe, helping them connect with others and see the world from very many diverse or different perspectives. So simply banning young users while leaving adults and the platform itself unchecked doesn't seem fair, and that's why the opposing view also makes sense. And meanwhile, in the reality, I think Australia's decision to go ahead with ban likely comes from a belief that that benefits outweigh the harms. So if the young people, the young generation use social media wisely, they can learn a great deal and make new friends, I believe. The key is guidance, I think. Someone to teach them, to guide them to how to use it responsibly. And that, of course, I think it takes like real long effort.
Right. Colin, as I mentioned earlier, South Korea is also looking into its own guardrails to protect its young from the harms of social media. What has been shared about the intentions here in South Korea, and what are your thoughts with regard to these initiatives?
Yes, I believe the head of the Broadcast and Media Commission here has mentioned publicly mentioned a need to follow in Australia's footsteps with some kind of program, some kind of regulation to keep the youngest teenagers off of social media or curb their usage somehow. Certainly most of them are power users, to say the least, here in South Korea. I don't know if any more concrete plans have been publicly brought to light besides that, but the intention has been stated in any case. And the coverage of the Australian project so far has stressed that it's very easy to get around these guardrails, very easy to it's not necessarily hacking, but I think a fairly bright teenager can find a way to still use Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it may be. And the ban doesn't cover all forms of social media, so you could say it is unevenly implemented right now, and it's not a strong form of protection, or it's not a strong ban, not a strong block for these young teenagers. So yes, this is always going to be a problem in any country. Kids will find a way around it, and it's very difficult to flatly ban social media even for a country, let alone for a particular group within that population. So keep that in mind. It's not easy. It may not be technically possible, but as the officials in Australia have said, well, this is step one. As we go forward, it'll get better. They're always going to be in a kind of arms race with the kids. They'll find ways around it, and then there'll be technological solutions to their ways around it, then you just keep going in and so on and so forth. But South Korea is known as a technologically savvy country, especially here, 21st century South Korea. It's a technology forward society. Large swaths of the population always have the new phone, always using the new technology, or they're up on AI and all that. So I suspect in that sense, it might be harder to affect such a ban here. But then we've seen examples of technology being more top-down controllable here than in other societies. We might recall 100 years ago, not that long, but a few years ago, there was that real name law in South Korea where netizens had to register with their real names. And it was in effect, and it happened for a period, but was struck down not much later. So maybe with a social media ban for adolescents, I could envision it happening, being somewhat effective, then being brought down for one reason or another. So I suppose it could happen here. Whether it could last, that's another matter entirely.
I suppose we'll have to wait and see then.
Indeed.
Meanwhile, Chen-Hao, a string of scandals involving celebrities here in South Korea has reignited debate over cancel culture here. First, how does cancel culture here in South Korea compare to that overseas?
Yeah, so recently we can see many like high-profile scandals among like Korean's entertainment industry, including comedian Bang Na-le, who's been accused of bullying her managers and then having them overworked for a long period. And another case is comedian Cho Se-ho. He was come under fire over allegations that he had accepted gifts and money from the gang and in exchange for promotional activities. And another, the most serious case is the actor Cho Jin-woon, who is facing revelations that as a teenager he was involved in the theft and sexual violence and was sent to the juvenile correction facility with additional reports of drunk driving and assault after his debut. And all these three are entertainers with name recognition, not even in South Korea, but across Eastern Asia and even around the world when we saw Korean variety shows or Korean dramas. And all three have now halted their activities, suspended their activities, with some even facing legal action or formal investigations. Many people argue that some of these cases, that facts are still unclear and the alleged wrongdoing happened a long time ago. So therefore it should not automatically justify or just cancel their activities or forcing them to suspend their careers. And in reality, each of these cases is quite different. Bang Na-le, Cho Jin-woon, and Cho Se-ho, it's just hard to lump them together. And in the past, we can see that there have been many Korean celebrities who clearly cross the line. For example, the current example is the famous singer, rapper Jessie, who effectively allowed her friends to attack her fans directly when asking for signing and ultimately step away from the spotlight. That happens in the end of, I remember it's in October or November last year. And there have been also some cases built on false accusations. For example, one of the most famous male singer in Korea, Kim Gong-mo, for instance, he was accused of sexual violence by YouTuber channel, only for later prosecutor later dropped the case for lack of evidence. But the damage has been done. It has damaged his reputation, and yeah, this kind of things happen. And in Japan and South Korea, if this kind of things happen, we mostly to prevent the controversy from snowballing, to spreading, or to limit the damage to agencies and the TV broadcasters. Mostly the standard response is just often to halt, to suspend, to stop the entertainment activities. In Japan, you can even see that it goes far as recalling the CDs or even the posters from the stores. They regard it as really serious incidents. But for example, in Taiwan and China, things usually don't go that far. Artists would have, mostly they will often held press conference to as soon as the scandal breaks and stay there trying to, on the press conference, they will try to stay their side of the story, and then the media outlets will then follow up based on what they said and trying to interview others to verify whether the celebrity lied or not. But if the person is ultimately clear, then the entire process can be an ordeal or very torturing indeed.
Right. Now, with regard to the fallout surrounding celebrities here in South Korea, an article by the BBC claims that these scandals have raised very fresh questions within the members of the public about the high moral standards to which celebrities in general here in Korea are held. What are your observations?
Yes,
Colin?
To foreigners and especially to Westerners, you mentioned the BBC article, it can seem that South Koreans demand that their celebrities be these paragons of virtue. And it's funny, from an American mindset, a moral celebrity is a bit of a contradiction in terms, I think, for a lot of us. We don't assume they're all behaving badly, but we just think that they probably, most of them are. In any case, here it's not like that. And you see this even among non-Korean celebrities. I know many media foreigners myself, and I think we can all remember certain figures who were beloved here one day, and then because of some remark on social media or something said in public, or they were seen in the wrong place, they didn't commit a crime, they didn't beat anybody up. They didn't even use drugs in many of these cases. They were gone the next day. They were made to disappear from public life. And so I think we're all we all have that in the back of, I'm not famous like they are, but we all have it in the back of their minds, where is the line? And it's hard to tell sometimes. I mean, I know one such individual who is taking a break from public life right now because he was seen to agree with someone else who said that Japan should be more even-handedly treated in Korea. And he didn't say that. He just said, yes, I think so. And then, he's taking a break now for that reason. So this is a mild version of what happens to Korean celebrities, though. They have a much worse, a much harsher standard to have to meet. We can all think of stories, we've talked about them here, of celebrities who have had maybe problems with drugs or something else, whatever it might be, and they eventually come to what is called the extreme decision in Korea. They end their own lives. And I think this may be a foreigner's perspective, but the bullying of the state, of the police, and the hectoring of the media and the public, I think is culpable for those deaths. I think it was not ultimately their own choice. When you're on the blacklist in Korea, it's very difficult to get off, and they realize that, and that's the result. So from a foreigner's perspective, it is too harsh. It's unrealistically harsh, the standards to which celebrities are held, but whether those will loosen up a bit is harder to say. I think they have, to a degree, but at the same time, there still is that demand to punish a public figure who is seen as having infringed on morals or morality, even if the public themselves sometimes, takes those liberties themselves.
Right. The article also talks about how some celebrities are forced to apologize just for having dated somebody. Yeah. Moving forward, Chen Hao, the Japanese media says a growing number of young South Korean men are seeking work and love in the neighboring nation. Could you walk us through the gist of that particular coverage?
Yes, according to the statistics, Korea, there were indeed 1,176 marriages between Korean men and Japanese women in 2024. That's a 40% increase from the previous year's 840 couples, making the highest number since 2015. And recently, Japanese media also published some interview features showing that more and more Koreans, especially Korean men, are choosing to move to Japan for work. And as you know, both Japan and South Korea, these two countries, they have highly competitive job markets. Everybody was competing, seeking a job. But South Korean society has long placed excessive emphasis on, for example, science, engineering, or medical, while neglecting the humanities in universities. And also there's a large pay gap between tables and other small and middle-sized companies, a disparity that is far less severe in Japan, which is why some Koreans choose to make a living there instead. But South Korea is geographically very close to Japan and Korea, and Japanese. The language are very similar, almost with very identical grammar. Koreans who are comfortable or get used to the Chinese characters can pick up the language in a relatively quick speed, and making Japan an appealing new destination for Korean job seekers. And Japan has also been entering in the low birth rate, aging society earlier than Korea and other countries, as we know. And now, Japan itself, it also needs a steady supply of young workers to support the labor market for the country. With Korea sharing this very similar cultural background, and Korean men bringing both military service experience and a track record of intense academic and job competition pressures, many Japanese employers and companies, they are now seeing Koreans as diligent workers with strong growth potential who can contribute positively to their companies and are therefore more willing to hire them.
Right, which is sad for Korea because we also have a very shrinking workforce as well.
Right.
Right. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Chen Hao, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Thank you. Colin, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you, Sunny.
Right, on that note, we end this week's editions of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and do join us again same time next Monday.